This evening we are reporting from our bed because we're both knackered.
Yeah.
But we're so excited about the latest and last episode of Patrick Melrose that we thought we would just do it from our boudoir.
Well, and also it's late because obviously Nadia's only just got back from Ibiza. I saw it last week, so my memory of the first half of the show is a little bit jaded. Because I've made a note here, great first shot, and I can't remember what the first shot was.
God, I can't remember what the first shot
exactly.
was. Wasn't it a sink?
I think it was a sink,
Yes.
actually. Wasn't he trying to break something up and it was kind of analogous with taking drugs?
Yeah.
Something like that. But it started with his mother asking him to kill her.
Yeah. Oh my God. If
Tell
I
us
could
how you
have
feel
got
about that,
through
Mum.
that screen and killed her myself, I would have done. I hated that woman. Hated her.
But didn't he
the way through this episode.
But didn't he play the tragedy of that terrible thing of he knows he's been treated badly by his mum, but he can't help but love her?
And therefore illustrating what we all know, that, children can be most brutalised in the most terrible way, and yet it's incredibly hard to stop a child loving their parent.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's a quote later in the programme where he's talking about his dad, and obviously the awfulness of what his dad does, and he sort of lists the emotions he's feeling, and then right at the end of them, it was when he was on the balcony with the woman he had the fling with, he says, "But strangely, I feel tenderness." And I thought that was really, really... what I love about this show is it's not afraid of embracing the intense contradictions of emotions. Where you think in any normal drama, you would have someone who does a bad thing and you just go, oh, he's a bad person. Whereas actually, things run far more complicatedly than that. It's not just a case of, clearly, even if your father abuses you, there is going to be complexity to how you feel about that father. And this was brave enough, and Benedict Cumberbatch and the boy that plays the young Patrick Melrose was so skilled, and unfortunately the actor who played the awful father of Patrick Melrose were very good at opening up the idea that however horrible they are, they're all humans.
And actually the mother through the series, you lose all sympathy for, don't you, by the end of it?
Yeah.
You really do. I mean, where are we going from and to? Because what's come to mind now is when he talks to her in the garden, but is it too soon for me to talk about that?
Talks to who in the garden?
His mother.
Oh God! Well, I mean, the whole film starts. The whole program obviously is set at the beginning of his mother's funeral, so we're flash cutting backwards, and I think we have a very beautifully observed, structured build up to him having to give his speech and how he can't give his speech. But yeah, I think in one of those flashbacks we find out that the most annoying man on the planet, the vandal in sandals, Seamus, is actually in his room. Do you remember that line the woman says?
I hope you're enjoying living in my mother's house.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yes, we are. Seamus has your room.
Yeah,
oh, my God.
But then we had a flashback to his mum talking to his wife. Do you remember that? What was she saying?
So there's a scene where his wicked, evil mother takes his Patrick Melrose's wife upstairs because she wants to share with her
That's right.
an in-depth letter from a child that used to come regularly and stay in the villa. And I think it's Nicholas's daughter. So...
Oh, that's interesting, because I wanted to ask you... we'll get to that
so
in a
then
minute.
In this letter, this detailed letter, this child describes her abuse, the fact, and says that her husband interfered with her.
No, it says that Patrick Melrose's father
interfered with her.
Yeah.
So Patrick Melrose's mother is like looking at her and saying, how I would have known.
Yeah.
And obviously she suffers from depression and alcoholism. And obviously, she's an unstable girl, and she just shows again another level of evil, doesn't she? And Patrick Melrose's wife is very upset by this, and wants to say to the mother, "Are you kidding?
Yeah.
He raped your own son," and is very upset. And that's my phone. He's fiddling with my phone. Sorry, I've lost my thread then. Yeah, so she becomes very upset, Patrick Melrose's wife, because obviously she knows that Patrick Melrose has been raped by his father, said abuser of this girl who's written this letter. So she, very upset, says to Patrick Melrose, I think you've got to talk to your mother. You've got to tell your mother the truth of what's happened. So we see him go, and he's just in his utter brilliance, isn't he, Benedict Cumberbatch? And he goes out to the garden and he sits in the chair. And like you said, you could identify with almost all of those emotions you see go across his face.
He managed to make I mean, I don't know if you need to be an addict to be able to pick it up, but the sheer constant tension in his chest and rib cage at nearly all times, because the feeling when you're both an active or a recovering addict is that catastrophe is going to crash in at any moment all the time, because you've kind of hardwired your brain and your emotions and your hormones into the highs and lows of artificial highs and lows, and so you get a hit all the way through it. So he's making the very brave move of opening up to his mum about what's happened to him,
and it's in his throat and he can't say it, and then he says he raped me, and there is not even a breath or a beat, and she says, yeah, me too.
That was it. And they held the
but
shot.
Wasn't his face just brilliant? The absolute, I mean, you saw his feelings shut down.
Yeah.
You saw the tears go back into his eyes. Utter disbelief.
Well, he knew that he'd been checkmated by his mother.
Yeah, me too, she said.
She had completely
And also,
closed off his opportunity.
she knew he was being raped. She knew he was being raped. There is evidence of this, that some mothers will turn a blind eye to their child, that happening to their child, so that they don't have to bear it themselves.
Just horrific.
Horrific.
Absolutely horrific. And so you get to his you sort of move through the funeral service, don't you, where he storms out and he can't actually
He's had to
proceed
listen
with
to
it.
one person after another go up and say, and there's a photograph of her holding a martini, and imagine that for adult child,
Now,
of an alcoholic, and you have to see that, and everybody is saying what an incredible woman she was and everything. He stands up to do his speech, doesn't he? And he's a hair's breadth away again from saying, she turned a blind eye when my father raped me, and then he runs out, doesn't he?
I mean, there was cut in amongst this, cutting back and forth from the funeral and the funeral wake, some of the scenes of him in rehab, and
loved the rehab
brilliant
scenes.
cameo with a woman who's at the funeral. I don't know the name of the actress, but she's as mad as a March hare. Very like some people I've met.
Correct to say that. Well, I don't know. But that's what she was.
Well, it's kind of what Edward St Albin would probably say. And I just thought, so you had these scenes in the rehab centre, which was so realistic. The group therapy, the group
very
chat,
dry wit.
But the sort of tension in there, his feeling outside of it, his not wanting to be in it. They have that little exchange. What was it about the metaphor? He says the metaphor of you can't take the sherry out of the cake.
Yeah, so the counsellor says, you are an alcoholic. You can't take the sherry out of the
And he
cake.
says, I don't think you can actually take the brandy out of fruitcake.
That's right.
And, so he was trying to there's that thing that the
But it showed how incredibly smart he was.
Yeah.
And that's the danger for anyone, isn't it, with the
biggest
counsellors?
piece of shit at the centre of the universe.
But also you can run rings around a counsellor that isn't as smart as you are.
And then this particular woman who becomes important, tries to sort of woo him in rehab. And there's my favourite line in it was where he describes himself to her as a narcissistic, schizoid, suicidal alcoholic. I think I've been there. And so she becomes this temptation for him. And this, again, is all in flashback, as we keep flashing back and forth from the funeral and the funeral wake. And that was an interesting little moment, wasn't it? Because there was a sliding door. And I think, again, one of the big parts of being an addict is all those sliding doors moments of big decisions that you could make. And so she was offering herself up as someone for him to go and visit and have a good time with once he comes out of rehab too. Meanwhile, you cut back to the funeral wake, and Nick, the guy played by the wonderful actor from The Crown, who plays the Queen's assistant in The Crown, who's now a very aged Nick, who's also the last living friend of Patrick Melrose's father.
And clearly an abuser as well.
Did you feel that?
Absolutely.
Did you
I
feel
think
that?
he abused Patrick Melrose
Did
as well.
you?
But he definitely abused his daughter because he
because
refers to it all the time.
And also he was having a go at Patrick Melrose's friend who's a shrink, and he was suggesting
The shrink of his
he
put into her head
Yeah,
that she'd been abused. But I think his daughter was the one that wrote the letter.
Of course. But isn't that interesting? Now, I don't know whether this is because I have a soft spot for that actor. I wondered whether what he was trying to say, because basically what happens is this exchange happens between Nick and this slightly unhinged woman from rehab who's also at the wake. And Nick,
it's one of my favourite ever.
Yeah, you've got to watch it just for his monologue about not suffering from mental health illness.
Yes. Oh my God, you have to find this scene. It's
just
in
find
the
the scene.
funeral, even if you
Brilliant.
don't watch Patrick, and fast forward to. I want to watch it 10 times.
Yeah.
It's the most brilliantly delivered.
And sadly, he has
hugely funny.
Hugely funny. says a lot of what we all feel about modern day life, but you're sort of sitting there thinking, this is politically so incorrect and correct at the same time. But anyway, he has a seizure, falls down, but there's a moment where he's looking at Patrick and he's trying to say his name. I thought he was trying to connect with him, because then we flash cut back to when...
Yeah, because he
he
was
was a
going to
kid.
die and he knew what he'd done.
Did you think that? I thought he was...
Yeah.
I read that he was trying to connect with Patrick and say, I knew what was happening. I sensed what was happening. But again, that just shows you, maybe. So...
maybe a bit of both.
So we sort of we move through all of the funeral, don't we? And we get to the... So what part of it stood out for you next?
Is that because you haven't got it in your notes?
No, I've got it in my notes, but you've just gone quiet, so I thought I'd offer it
Well,
up to you.
because you were talking, I've got plenty to
Go
say.
on then, say it.
Well, I think, there was so much that happened after the funeral, wasn't there? I mean, we saw the connections with his wife, his ex-wife, and...
It was brilliantly played.
And his sons. And he's drinking, and there's a great line, wasn't it, where his wife says to him, I'm not Caroline, his mother. I'm going to have to protect our sons in the way that you weren't protected.
Yeah.
I loved that scene. It broke my heart.
Yeah.
And he's sort of falling around. I mean, he's in the chaos of drink.
When was this? This was at the beginning. When was he falling around drunk with the chaos of the kids?
Well, it was a flashback in between the funeral, because we were in flashback half the time.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm trying to remember
it was one of the flashbacks.
Yeah, which one?
Well, when he goes round to the flat to get stuff and his wife
Oh,
comes
that was
in.
earlier. Yeah. Oh, yes, and he was in the corner knocking stuff over.
Yeah.
No, that
So
was
basically,
tragic.
there's lots of bits and pieces where you see a lot of love coming from his ex-wife, and also little bits with his sons, doesn't he? He wants to be a good father. You see him check out of rehab, and I love this moment. He's in a cab. And this cab is one of these really jolly, chatty cab drivers.
He's heading to the address that this woman in rehab has given him.
Who has written him a note, if you want to do something crazy.
Yeah.
So she wants to bring him down. She wants him not... you meet people like that, don't you?
I've met lots of women like that.
So he's just pulling up outside a house. So he was getting sober and he's now going to go crazy. And it's just something that the cab driver says to him, who'd suffered from depression, and said, my kid's got me back.
And it just
he
snags
stops.
him.
He says... What? He goes, well, my kids got their dad back. And he gets the cab to turn around and go back to rehab. Yeah. It's a really heartwarming moment, because suddenly you've got real hope that he could possibly survive this disease of addiction. And he goes back to rehab. And yeah, I love that bit.
But when he's escaping rehab, there's a very funny moment where this woman, who I keep referring to as the slightly unhinged woman, brilliant actress, she's chasing him and telling him how brilliant certain drugs that she's on are, as he's trying to escape from rehab.
Yeah.
But that scene of him escaping from rehab, when I was in rehab, we would always hear stories of people escaping from rehab.
Oh, really?
And they would end up getting to the end of Priory Lane, or whatever the road was that went into, not Twickenham, into Putney.
Which one?
And there was a particular pub that expected rehab people who would just slot in, and so as he was running with his bags, desperate to leave, it was kind of... I seem to remember stories of people saying people just literally would bolt for the gate.
So sad.
I mean, it's that,
Anyway, and then towards the end, after that, we go back to the scene that we've seen throughout the series.
Yeah.
Flashbacking. Absolutely petrifying. Where the little boy comes in. We get the sense that the father is now destitute. They're in a bit of a rundown room. He says, come and sit here with me, boy. He says, Patrick Melrose, the little boy of 8, goes into the bathroom. And we've seen this flashback all the way through the series.
You're seeing the lizard
and the
as
father is calling him, and he's squeezing. You just see his hands squeezing on the sink, preparing to go through to his father's room. And of course, all the way through it, we've been thinking, this is it. He's going to be raped again. Because there is actually a bit, isn't there, where Patrick Melrose talks about the rapes and how it went on for years and years, and how his mother just turned a blind eye, and she must have known, and she must have known. I think she knew. I think she knew.
Oh, absolutely.
So we get this wonderful resolution of the story where he's screaming for Patrick, the little 8-year-old, and he opens the door, and you think, little Patrick, and you think, oh my God, he's going out, and his father pats the bed and says, come here. And then what happens, Mark?
The boy says no.
He says no.
And then he
Nobody
says...
should do what you do to another person. And the dad, who we despise,
stands up and turns around, and he looks like
he's still sitting down.
No. He turns around and he stands up, and he looks like he's going to be filled with rage, but he's absolutely floored because then the second line.
What?
Yeah.
What? And you think, oh my God, he's going to break him in half because he warned him of that. And his next line is, I know. Now, I said to you in episode 2...
That sounded really confusing. It sounded like Patrick Melrose's line was, I know.
No, the dad said, I know.
The dad turned around and he said,
No, we did
I know.
say that. So then... So, do you remember in episode 2 or 3 when I said to you... Yeah, episode 2, when we'd seen him for the first time with the rape of the boy. And then he's sitting in the bathroom with that boiling hot bath and he plunges his hand into it. And I said to you, didn't I reckon Patrick's father was also raped. And I think we felt that very much in the end episode.
I thought an unenviable part for an actor to play insofar as you're playing essentially pure evil because he's raping his son. And yet, again, I think what makes this series stand head and shoulders above many others that you'd get is that the whole structure of the story, the strength of the books, the strength of the way in which all the actors have performed it, is that even at this point, you have to understand that Patrick Melrose makes sense of what Benedict says as a grown-up Patrick says when he says he feels tenderness towards both his parents. You have to understand that to fully understand why the addiction has taken hold, because the addiction and his drive to self-destruction is all about him not being able to deal with his love for still his mum and dad who've treated him so badly and his hatred of them. If it was just hatred, you wouldn't really need to drink on it or take drugs about it. I mean, it just wouldn't be that simple. It's the contradiction of his emotions. And in that moment, the father played it perfectly. Whereas he turned around and he said,
Oscar
I know.
award-winning.
Just that one line that he knows that it's wrong. And you see another close-up of his hands go on his lap.
On his knees.
As if a child not quite knowing what to do with his own hands when it must have happened when he was a kid.
And it did happen to him, I'm pretty sure of it.
I thought that was incredibly powerful.
It was a stunning episode. There was only 1 week episode in this little series of 5.
Yeah.
No, not episode 2, episode 3. Episode 2 when we were in France with the little boy.
Oh, yeah, episode...
But episode 3 is the weakest of 5.
No, episode 2 is the one where at the party.
No, it's not. Episode 3 is...
Oh, yeah, no,
Party's
you're right.
after we've been to South of France with the little boy. But it's just... We highly recommend it, don't we?
Yeah. It's probably... It really is one of the best series I've seen on TV. And I think Benedict Cumberbatch, if he...
Do you not think he deserves a little more respect now?
I think
now he's one of our favourite
I think he
actors.
deserves a golden cucumber or something. He deserves something to win something. I mean, he's remarkable.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
And you know what? A huge hats off to his wife as well. I thought she had played it so beautifully, simply, a simple love that a woman had. And she felt his tragedy and everything, didn't she? And the dad and the Nicholas, well, they were all just brilliant. I hate the mother. For me, she was the worst, the most evil character out of everyone.
Jennifer
in it.
Jason Leigh.
She was brilliant.
Very good, very good. I feel sad that I've had to leave Dear Patrick because I felt a real sort of...
I miss him.
Kinship. Felt a real kinship.
I might read the books now because you got me the first book, but it's a bit difficult reading it while watching it.
You need to go to bed now.
It's bedtime now. We're
right.
actually in bed.
Yeah.
So that's good, isn't it?
Okay, night-night.
Night.